So we're going to talk a little bit about how to develop a product when you've got some short-term goals, like making money or surviving or raising money, and long-term goals where you've got maybe some long-term product vision. I think it's pretty typical for a company to start, and you've got a vision for where you want to go. And at least in our case, and I think in many other cases, it's not a 6-month vision or a 12-month vision. It's really for us, it's really a 10 to 20-year vision of where we think it's going to go. And when we set out, we were like, it'll probably take about 10 years to build the first version of our product that we really like. Just for those who are counting, it has been 8 years, so we're not quite there yet. So we're still sort of not where we really want to be, even from our original starting point. So, in other cases, it's 3 to 5 years, 2 to 4 years, whatever it is. There's always some long-term horizon of where you think you want to go. And there's always a lot of short-term goals along the way, whether it's raising money, whether it's hitting a certain revenue target, whether it's paying your bills to actually pay salary. There's always going to be something you want to do to get something done. And so it's really about balancing that. So just first, I think there's some question of, well, have you actually done that? And so a little bit on what MongoDB has done over the last 8 years, and things look generally pretty good, right? Numbers have gone up and to the right mostly, and that's generally the way you want it to look, and that's all pretty good. And so things are working pretty well. And for us, it really comes down to a relatively simple process that we try to use as we're developing the product, as we make every decision. Because at the end of the day, we're making a lot of little decisions every day, a few big decisions, but most of the big decisions end up not feeling like big decisions when you make them. It's always the little things. And so this is why I don't really believe in sort of the big decisions versus small decisions versus who's doing what. It's all about sort of the process. Using the same process for every decision, so there's always a workflow, so you know what's going to happen, and so there's never really a question mark. And for us, it's really important because our community is so large and there's so many people who use MongoDB who don't necessarily get to talk to us every day. It's really often about, can other people predict what we're going to do, and other people have a good intuition about what we're going to do, so they actually feel confident we're a database. So they're actually betting their business on us. And that's a pretty big ask for a company to do, to actually take their product, build it on top of MongoDB, and say, okay, we're gonna trust you. We're gonna trust your product roadmap. And that's what we ask people to do every day. And so for that, we really want to have a pretty nice process that we go through so that people can understand where we're going. So quick overview before we get started. So it starts with a Spark, then you combine it, then you mature it. This means nothing, so let's keep going. So it starts with a Spark. So I don't know where every one of you got your ideas from, but I can tell you where our idea from, where sort of the spark of interest came for us. And so for us, it really started with our own pain. So MongoDB is a database, and me and my other co-founder, in the decade prior to us starting this company, we think we built 12 different custom database solutions for the products we were developing. And these were across 3 different companies, a decade of time. And in each case, we were trying to do something for our application, for our product, for our business, and 12 times the databases that we were using, and this runs the gamut from Oracle to MySQL to everything you could think of, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we tried everything you could possibly imagine, and 12 times, all the current technology failed us, and we ended up building something ourselves. And so around 2007, we said, we want to build a new thing. We were kind of getting bored of what we were doing. We're like, we're going to start a new company. We got this cool idea for an app. We sat down, we started whiteboarding how we might do it. And in about an hour or two, we said, all right, well, the database is going to break. And then we said, fine, we're going to go build a cool database to make this app work. And then about 3 days later, we decided, you know what? The database is actually way more interesting than the product we were going to build. So we just said, all right, fine, we're just going to build a database. And that's how we started building a database company. Sort of makes sense, right? No. Terrible idea if anyone's thinking about doing it. So for us, what was the spark? Well, really, it was one key concept. And for us, that key concept was databases are not easy or fun for people to use. So why aren't they fun to use? And there's a lot of technical reasons why, but at the end of the day, too many developers, too many people in operations have to spend too much time working around the database, trying to massage the database into something that they actually really want, working around limitations in the database, and rather than building your actually building your business. Right? So at the end of the day, our main goal is that people don't spend time thinking about databases and spend time thinking about building applications and building products. because that's sort of our job. Our job is to build a database, and your job is to use the database to do more interesting things. Because we're sort of always in the back doing the boring work. So the next thing really was, all right, does anyone actually agree with this concept that we came up with, that databases are useless in their current form? And if you look at the database space in 2007, one thing you note is that there's about 1,000 different tools for working with databases. And the reason for this is not because it's really fun to make these tools, but because no one in the developer community actually enjoyed working with databases. They all found it frustrating. They all found it annoying. And so every time someone came up with something, they were like, oh, I have to figure out how to deal with a database, and that's sort of a pain in the neck. So the idea kind of made sense, and the idea really became very simple. And we ended up focusing on what's the simplest possible way to interact with data, and the result was JSON. And JSON in 2007 wasn't that cool or popular, but how many people here know about JSON today and think it's sort of the coolest thing ever? Yeah, like 3 people. So this is a JSON document. It's a little hard to see with all the bright lights in it, but we can talk about why JSON's cool in about 90 seconds. So how many people here have used a JSON database or a JSON document before? Oh, that's actually not too bad. How many people here have used Excel? You never used Excel? You used Excel. Don't lie. Everyone's used Excel. So we're going to play a little game. The game's going to be, let's make a user database in Excel. The game is very simple. You start with a couple of columns. You start with a first name column and a last name column. This kind of makes sense. Now let's go and put an email address in. It's getting a little scary, but let's just go with it. We're going to have an email address column. Now let's go put in an address. How do we do it? I'm not going to. It's a little smaller when we play the game, but I'll play both sides. So what you do is fine. I'll put an address field in there. You've got address, you've got state, city, but there's no cities and states. I don't know what they have in Canada. Provinces. So whatever they have here, and you've got all these things, and this is actually part of the problem too, right? So now you've got this address, but now it's like, okay, I've got a work address and a home address. What am I going to do? Well, oh, this is easy. I'm going to have province 1, province 2, zip code 1, zip code 2, country 1, country 2. That's easy. All right, let's say I want you to have 5. This is getting annoying, right? Because now I've got, 5 fields for each address and 5 addresses, so that's 25 columns in my Excel spreadsheet, and this is kind of getting unwieldy. And then you go ask me to store something about, oh, store everyone's likes or dislikes or phone numbers or like 4 different email addresses or what, I don't know what you store about people. That's your job. So all of this information about people. And then there are different countries, and different countries store addresses in different ways, and they store email addresses in different ways, and storing this all in Excel is kind of a nightmare. So what do? You make different sheets. And so you store different types of information on different sheets. And so instead of having 25 columns for your addresses, you have all your addresses on the second sheet, and you've got the same user ID on one sheet as the second sheet, and you can find all this information. It's kind of a nightmare. Does anyone know what we just built? A relational database. And this is what relational databases have been doing with data for 40 years. They take a very reasonable thing, which is the basic information about a person, and force developers and people who work with databases to, instead of thinking about a person as a person, think about them as many, many different attributes spread out across this universe. So this is actually very annoying for people. So the typical user profile data set in an application requires 75 tables in a relational database. So that's 75 sheets in an Excel document, whatever you want to call it, which is actually really annoying. So now let's say you're new to the team. You start day 1 on the job, and I want to say, oh, I want to go look at my user profiles and see what kind of information I'm storing. Instead of looking at one thing, you're looking at 75 different things. Now for computers, it's also incredibly inefficient as well. If you want to load up every information about, Bob, is there a Bob here? Great. If you want to load all the information about Bob, you actually have to go to 75 different tables from a computer standpoint, load all that information before you can do work with Bob. Now, the really interesting thing about this is that this is so inefficient and so slow in relational databases, an entire industry came up to work around this problem, which is the caching industry like Memcache and Redis and all these Oracle Coherence. The entire industry was built on top of relational databases because relational databases were so slow. So those ideas kind of made sense. So in MongoDB, we said, you know what, let's store all the information about Bob in a single document. And that was cool. Because now how I'll learn about Bob, I go to one place. If the computer wants to load everything about Bob, they go to one place. Everything's really nice and really efficient. But this by itself is pretty much useless. Right? Yes, this is a really cool idea. And this was not that novel. Storing information about Bob in one place is better than storing information about Bob in 75 different places. It's like, wow, Eliot, that's awesome. Thank you. So what made this actually work? And this is actually, in my mind, the most important part of this whole thing, which is sort of combining that spark, whatever that interesting thing you're doing with is, with the actually really interesting, useful information out there that already exists. So in the database world, there are tons and tons of great databases out there, and there are many reasons why people like them. And what we tried very hard to do, in everything we do at MongoDB, is to never reinvent the wheel unless we absolutely have to. Right? This is the same old, buy versus build versus buy, and whatever you want to call it. It's all kind of the same thing. But the key for us is knowing the line between when do we actually have to design something? What is the line for starting from scratch, coming up with our own invention and inventing it and building it ourselves, versus taking the best thing out there and adopting it for our needs. And we'll go through this more. And of course, the next big step is maturing it. Right? So, if you think about MongoDB 1.0, which came out about 6 years ago, it was not a very good database. Right? It's a tiny new database. It's all very immature. So you got this cool thing, you get this cool spark of innovation, and you've got this, now you're combining it with some of this other cool stuff. But at the end of the day, it's actually still pretty useless. And the interesting thing is that you can actually use the same process over and over and over again to actually get where you want to go. And it may take a very long time, but you can get there eventually. So, this 3-step process, and now we're going to take that same 3-step process and adapt it to actually reaching maturity. We've got our idea, we're off the ground, we've got some people interested in our idea, but we've got to keep going. So, obviously you've got to balance short-term and long-term. So that's sort of why we're here. And the key for me really is making short-term part of long-term. So let's look at some pictures, because pictures are fun. So let's imagine this green line is your product vision. Okay? It's, maybe it's not a perfect product vision, maybe it should be an angle. You don't seem to like my product vision slide, but it's okay. More exciting? We'll get more exciting. This is not revenue, this is not growth, this is just sort of like where the product's going. Right? You build it fast, then you've got to mature a lot of stuff in the middle, then you grow more. It's whatever, it's a line. Don't think too much about it. Okay, so a lot of companies I talk to, a lot of companies I work with, they have got a very particular problem. I'm sure a lot of you have faced this. You launch your product, you get like a little bit of traction, you get like a dozen clients, it's all kind of cool. Then this one really big client comes on and says, I would totally buy your thing and spend a lot of money with you if you had feature X. Has anyone ever had this problem before? Yeah. Liars. You've all had this problem. So what happens? You do this. Right? And that represents feature X for company Y that completely throws your product roadmap completely out of whack. So sometimes you have to do it, but it's generally a pretty bad idea. When I've looked at companies, when I've sort of advised people, that is where so many companies go wrong. It's sort of unbelievable, right? Because you want to do this. You want to get that big deal. In our history, we've made some mistakes, but I think we've kept our mistakes mostly looking like this, right? And each one of those little deviations represents one feature you accelerated or did because one client asked you for that you didn't think you were going to sell more of, but you sort of want to get that first big deal. You wanted to get that inroad. And I think it's okay as long as you really stick relatively close. Otherwise, you become a consulting company. Now, it's not bad to be a consulting company, but you just need to sort of accept that that's what you are. You are going to build products specifically for certain clients, and that's what you want to do. And that's actually a perfectly legitimate thing to do. There's actually some very big companies out there, but I don't think that's what a lot of the product companies out there want to be. So one of the things that I balance every day is this. And it's every feature that comes in. Is it for one client? Is it for 20 clients? And how do we actually prioritize this list? And that becomes sort of the most important thing. So we're going to go through a couple of examples of, if we have time, buy versus build. And this is sort of interesting. Maybe. I think it's interesting. So when you've got data in a database, you want to report on it. You want to actually be able to analyze it. So MongoDB version 1.0 had no reporting built in, no integrations. It really didn't have anything. So the first thing we did was we built this MapReduce thing. And MapReduce was never great for anyone. It's sort of this really big hammer. Right? We gave people a big sledgehammer, and it didn't matter what they were trying to do. It didn't matter if they were trying to screw in a screw or hammer a nail. We gave them a sledgehammer. Now, if you have a screw and you have a sledgehammer, you could probably put the screw through the wall. And that might actually work okay. It's not going to be pretty. It may leave a mark. But at least people can actually get the screw in. But over time, what we really wanted to do was actually give people, a whole toolbox. And so we wanted to give people sort of a hammer and a screwdriver, and there's probably more tools out there that I don't know what they are, like a wrench thingy. Maybe? I don't know. So, okay, so we had this MapReduce thing. This is an example of something we built that we knew wasn't exactly on our product roadmap. We knew we had to give people something, and then as soon as we did it, we were like, okay, now we're actually going to build the thing people want. Now that thing was the aggregation framework in MongoDB. That took about 2 years to build. Put it out there. It kind of worked, right? That was sort of the spark. This is the really cool thing we're going to invent, and we're going to make it work. We combined it with some of the great features of Unix pipelines, with sort of, anyone here, Unix pipelines need something? No? 2 people? Great. So we combined sort of this Unix pipeline idea with this MongoDB aggregation idea and made this really cool kind of thing. It all kind of worked. Put it out there, people really liked it, and now we're sort of maturing it. And so we just, a couple weeks ago, we announced we're adding a whole bunch of new features to it. We're doing this big integration with Tableau so people can do sort of the best of breed reporting with sort of the best of breed database, and that's all kind of cool. So the next thing is storage engines. And this will be the last thing for those who want to go deeper into the tech. We can sort of have some fun with this one. So the original storage engine in MongoDB was called the mmap storage engine. And it was a pretty good storage engine. It lasted about 5-6 years until people got bored of it and decided they wanted something better. And about a year ago, we were looking at the space and deciding how we're going to add all the features that people wanted. And we figured it would take us about 3 years. And 3 years is really a long time to wait. If you're using a database and you have to wait 3 years for the thing you want, you're going to be pretty mad at your database vendor, i.e. you're going to be pretty mad at me. And I don't like people being mad at me. It's sort of not a good feeling. So we're looking at this roadmap for 3 years. We were getting all very upset. We were like, what are we going to do? And then we had this brilliant idea, which was, oh, look, there are some really smart people out there who build storage engines for a living. Can we just go buy one? And so what we literally did was we modified MongoDB so we could integrate with any storage engine on the market and basically had a runoff with every storage engine out there. And we ended up finding this company called WireTiger, which was, for those of you who have been in the tech space for a long time, there's a storage engine called BerkeleyDB, which came out in 1990, which was eventually bought by Oracle. The same team that built BerkeleyDB in 1990 left Oracle, built this, starting in 2009 or so. And this is basically the best storage engine people on the planet. And they were like, well, we don't want to build a database, but we'd love to be under MongoDB. And we were like, well, we don't want to build the storage engine, but we want the best storage engine on the planet. And so we acquired the company and integrated technology. And it's been sort of one of the best decisions we made. Now, if you're a database, the storage engine component is in some ways the most important part of the whole thing. Right? In some ways, it is the thing that actually stores the data on disk. So it's actually really, really important. And for us to sort of say, we're not going to build one, we're going to buy one, to a lot of people was sort of crazy. Well, you're a database company. This is what you do, is you store data. Why are you buying that piece of technology? And it really comes back to the very simple idea is that what we're innovating on, the thing that we care about, that sort of spark of things that we care about, is about making the database usable for people, making it a fun part of your stack, making it easy to work with, making it sort of a trusted tool. That's what we wanted to innovate on. We wanted to innovate on that side of it, making developers as productive as they can, making things that scale really well. That's what we care a lot about. We don't really care about innovating in the storage engine space. There are better people out there that do that for us. And so for us, we've made this very clear line. We are not going to innovate on that area. We're going to buy the best thing we possibly can. We're going to put that under MongoDB and move on. We did that in the fall. We released it in March. One of the better decisions we've made is not doing that. It's a really great team, incredibly happy about it. And I'm sure there are other cases, there's lots of other cases, lots of other examples. But that's sort of the basics. Hope that was somewhat interesting. And thank you very much.